He thought he was choosing a wife. In truth, he was choosing the one person untouched by performance. While the family polished the golden daughter like a trophy, the invisible sister was quietly becoming something more dangerous, authentic. And that is why this story hits harder than a simple betrayal. It is not just a rich man rejecting the wrong bride. It is a brutal collision between power, performative love, and the hunger to finally be seen.
She was the phantom in their system, the forgotten daughter, cast in the periphery as her perfect sibling shone with engineered brilliance. But tonight, a fatal error was approaching, for the city's most formidable man had no use for the prized specimen offered in their pact. He wanted her. And when Adrian Volkov stepped into the shimmering, sterile room and ended her sister's engagement with 5 icy words, Elena Whitmore's world shattered into a consequence she could never have foreseen. This is the chronicle of the subject no one saw until one man did. Like this video and comment with your city to follow this case's trajectory. The champagne felt like a deception. Elena watched the bubbles rise in the crystal flute with a scientist's detachment. The Whitmore dining room glowed, staged for a minor coronation, which it was. Her mother's execution was perfect. White roses spilled from silver urns, and each place setting was worth more than a common person's yearly wages. Servers drifted between guests like well-trained specters. To Victoria and Adrian, her father toasted, raising his glass. The smug satisfaction of a man who had brokered a deal far above his station colored Richard Whitmore's voice. To family, to power, and to a future that will ensure the Whitmore name transcends all we have known. Elena studied her sister's smile. Victoria understood the exact angle to catch the light, how to mist her eyes with feeling without smudging her makeup. It was an art of calculated perfection Elena had never mastered. Agreement murmured around the table. 12 guests dressed for a state dinner, all participating in the fiction that this was love, not a merger. Elena put down her untouched champagne and reached for her water. Elena, dear, at least pretend to celebrate your sister's strategic victory. Her mother's voice, when used for correction, had the quality of sharpened steel. Catherine Whitmore smiled through the reprimand, as image was everything, but her eyes promised a reckoning later. Of course, Mother. My congratulations, Victoria. Elena lifted her water glass in a small gesture. Her sister failed to notice. This was routine. Elena had stopped looking for recognition around her 16th year when Victoria was presented to the social arena, and Elena knew she was fated to be the understudy in her own home. Not beautiful enough, not charismatic enough, not enough in any measurable way to merit the focus her sibling drew just by breathing. Adrian should be here any second, Victoria announced, glancing at her device with a studied casualness that belied her desperate need for approval. He has confirmed his route. Champagne was refilled, and Uncle began a story about an influential acquaintance. A cousin laughed too loudly. The entire affair was a play Elena had seen too many times, a performance where she hated every line. She had met Adrian Volkov only once, 3 months before, at some charity gala. While Victoria had stalked him with practiced intent, Elena had found refuge in an alcove with a novel, her standard survival tactic. He had discovered her there, as if by accident, also retreating from the social onslaught. They spoke for no more than 20 minutes. He ignored the usual questions used to map out social territory. Instead, he pointed to her book, a worn copy on landscape design, and asked if her interest was real or just a shield. Both, she admitted, and he laughed. It was a real laugh, not the polite, manufactured sound most men in their circle used. They talked of green spaces in urban planning, the power struggles behind public park financing, and how cities starve the soul of beauty. It was the most human conversation she'd had in months. Then Victoria had appeared, a sun pulling all planets into her orbit, and Elena saw Adrian's expression lock down into a guarded mask. Her sister threaded an arm through his with the ease of ownership, and Elena slipped back into this crowd, becoming invisible once more. She replayed that conversation far more than was rational, holding no illusions about Adrian Volkov. The man was a known quantity, a predator whose ruthlessness her family found attractive, assuming they could harness it through marriage. Yet for 20 minutes, someone had spoken to her as if she were a person, as if her ideas mattered. It was a pathetic thing to cling to. Elena knew this, but she had been trained to survive on the barest emotional rations. He's here. Victoria stood, smoothing her ivory dress, a garment that cost more than a used car. Do I look acceptable? You are flawless, my dear, her mother confirmed, which was true. Victoria's greatest talent was her state of perpetual flawlessness. Elena heard movement in the hall, men's voices speaking to the staff. Her father rose, straightening his tie, preparing to greet the man who could make or break fortunes with a single memo, the asset entering his portfolio. The man who, it was whispered, kept company so dangerous that people hesitated to say his name. The dining room doors swung open. Adrian Volkov didn't just walk into a room. He seized its atmosphere. He was tall, dark, and wore a suit that seemed molded to his frame. It wasn't his looks that commanded the space, however. It was his presence, an aura that suggested the room existed by his permission, that he was gracing the moment rather than attending an event. Adrian, my love, Victoria purred, moving toward him with her hands outstretched to claim her prize. He stopped a yard from her, letting her hands hang in the air. His face was a neutral mask, a feature that only amplified the sudden chill. Victoria, his voice was utterly flat. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate the invitation. Elena saw her father's triumphant smile begin to crack. This was not the tone of a man arriving to celebrate his engagement. This was an entirely different protocol. Well, come in, come in. Don't just linger there. Catherine gestured to the empty seat of honor beside Victoria. We have so much to discuss. I will not be staying. Adrian's words hit the room like stones thrown into a still pond. I came to address this personally as it felt necessary, despite being an inconvenience. Elena felt a cold knot form in her gut. She knew that tone. It was the sound of a final, unchangeable order. It was the voice of a man delivering a sentence from which there was no appeal. Address what exactly? Richard's professional grin was crumbling. If this is about the prenuptial terms, I can assure you our team can. There will be no team. There will be no prenuptial. There will be no marriage. Adrian's eyes swept over the family with the detached interest of an engineer surveying a building slated for demolition. I am ending the engagement. Effective immediately, any agreement between our families is null and void. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like it could shatter. Victoria's face drained of all color, shifting through shades Elena had never witnessed on skin. Her mother looked as if she'd been struck. Her father's expression warped from confusion to fury in a heartbeat. You can't be serious. Richard's voice started to rise before he wrestled it back toward a semblance of calm. Adrian, if there's been some sort of misunderstanding, I'm certain we can work it out. There is nothing to misunderstand. I have no intention of marrying your daughter. I never did. Adrian's words were delivered with a frankness that bordered on brutality. The arrangement was a proposal initiated by your family. I let the talks continue longer than they should have. That was an error on my part. I am now correcting it. How dare you? Catherine's voice was a sharp cry of disbelief. You have shamed Victoria in front of our entire family. You made promises, public overtures. I have made no public statements regarding marriage. Any announcements your family chose to release were premature, if not entirely fabricated. He finally looked at Victoria, who stood frozen, her social programming seemingly crashed. You are an attractive and capable woman. I am sure you will find a more suitable partner, but that partner will not be me. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. Elena had never seen her sister without a script, had never seen her charisma fail so completely. The spectacle was unnerving. Despite a lifetime of being sidelined, Elena felt a sudden, sharp ache of pity. This is unforgivable. Richard stepped toward Adrian as if he could physically block his exit. Do you have any idea what this will do to Victoria's name, to our family's position? Yes. Adrian didn't flinch. But that is not my problem. Your family mistook a preliminary talk for a sealed deal. That was your choice. I am now making mine. You arrogant, Richard started, but Adrian cut him off with a single look, a silent threat that made her father flinch back. I would strongly advise you not to finish that sentence. The warmth bled from Adrian's voice, leaving an arctic cold. His words were a velvet-gloved threat, painting a vivid masterpiece of their ruin, of every sordid family secret laid bare for the world. The blood drained from Richard's face, leaving a mask of waxy shock. But Catherine, a veteran of social warfare, rallied instantly, her counterattack a sum of money to make it all disappear. Adrian waved it away like smoke. His assessing gaze swept the room, and for a heart-stopping second snagged on Elena. The reason, he declared, was a flaw in the foundation. Victoria sought a trophy, a role he refused to play. Betrayal, Victoria whispered, the word shattering as it left her lips. The mask of Victoria's poise finally cracked, raw anguish breaking through. You said I was everything you admired. Adriana's reply was a surgeon's scalpel, precise and without pity. I said you were accomplished. He dissected her words, separating admiration from love, leaving her emotionally eviscerated. Elena watched her sister's world crumble to dust. A tremor ran through Richard's voice. Get out of my house. Adrian turned, but paused at the door, a perfectly timed beat in his cruel symphony. Actually, there is one more thing. You've done enough, Catherine hissed. He paid her no mind. His focus shifted, his gaze finding Elena and holding her captive. I'd like to speak with your younger daughter, privately. The air vanished. Every eye turned to Elena. On her mother's face, a storm played out. Confusion, suspicion, then a wave of horror. Victoria's features twisted into something ugly and new, a look of sheer fury aimed at her sister. Absolutely not. Richard moved between them, a bulwark of paternal rage. You've insulted one daughter. You are not getting near the other. Adrian barely acknowledged the display. I am merely asking for a conversation. The ultimatum hung in the air. 10 minutes of her time, or he would leave. Every instinct screamed at Elena to refuse, to shrink back into the shadows. But something in his direct gaze held her fast. Elena, do not, her mother began. Yet a small, unfamiliar voice slipped past Elena's own lips. It's fine. I'll talk to him. A strangled gasp escaped Victoria. You can't be serious, Elena. It's just a conversation, Elena repeated, the words a fragile shield. She stood, her body trembling but obedient, a rebellion warring with a lifetime of submission. After 24 years of compliance, this single act was a schism in her history. The library, she instructed him. As she walked out, the weight of their silent judgment pressed on her like a physical blow. The familiar hallway seemed to stretch. The heavy oak door of the library felt like the gate to her own fate. He followed. The click of the latch was the sound of a lock turning on her old life. She was surrounded by leather-bound lies. These unread volumes were a world away from the few worn paperbacks she treasured. She turned, her arms crossed, a fragile fortress. I assume you didn't detonate my family's life to discuss garden design. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, though that was a pleasant talk. You remember it? I remember most things that matter. His eyes scanned her, missing nothing. You cut your hair. Her hand flew to the shorn locks, a secret rebellion. I needed a change. It suits you better, he said, the compliment landing with unexpected weight. He took a step closer. This isn't a game, he began, not revenge nor a whim. Okay, she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. What? Then came the proposal, laid out with the cold precision of a business deal. A marriage contract. 12 months, clear terms, financial compensation, a clean break, her role to play his wife in public. Her reward, freedom, bought and paid for. A wild, sharp laugh escaped her. You're insane! Perhaps, he allowed, his expression unreadable. But I am serious. This wasn't an offer. It was a weapon, the final twist of the knife. That's the most hateful thing I've ever heard. It's not about them. It's about you. He spoke of Victoria's performance, and then of Elena's honesty, the only real thing he'd encountered. We spoke for 20 minutes about parks, he stated, as if it were undeniable truth. The best 20 minutes of that night. He laid out his needs for a wife like a general planning a campaign, an asset for business, for appearances. He needed a partner in public, not in private. The room seemed to tilt around Elena. And you chose me for this, because we had one normal conversation. I chose you, he countered, his logic a cold blade, because you don't want anything from me. He painted a bleak world where every action was a transaction. In her disinterest, he saw a stark, brutal honesty. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Probably, he admitted. But it doesn't make it any less true. I'm offering you an exit, Elena. An escape, he explained, from this house, from her family, from the suffocating invisibility of her life. He repeated the price, 1 year of performance for the money to build a life of her own. The word freedom echoed in the silent chambers of her heart. This is crazy, she breathed, but the words held no fire. He asked her only to think, promising a contract with its own escape clause. She pushed past his logic. But why me? He held her gaze for a long moment. Because you looked at me as if I were boring, not dangerous. He explained that everyone else saw him as either a threat or a prize. A small, incredulous laugh broke from her. I was just being polite. Exactly. He extended a business card, a formal invitation to a mad proposal. My private number. Think it over. She took it. The heavy, crisp cardstock felt real in her trembling hand. Her mind screamed that this was madness, but a deeper part of her whispered that it was a door. This was a way out. Her life was a gilded cage, her dreams starved. This insane contract was a key. A shift inside her was palpable. If I did this, what would you tell everyone? Why me and not Victoria? His answer was swift and brutal. The truth, that I chose someone real over a performance. He watched her, his gaze analytical, as if he could see the gears of her thoughts turning. He conceded the fallout, the family's rage, society's judgment as a simple, unpleasant fact. Your life holds no comfort now, he observed, with a bitterness that seemed to surprise even him. He framed it as a gamble where she had nothing left to lose. He stepped back toward the door. His instructions were clear: read the contract, call him with questions, or burn the card. At the threshold, he stopped. You've been a ghost for too long, Elena. It's time for a change. Then he was gone, leaving her on the edge of a cliff. The door swung open again. It was Victoria, her eyes burning. What did he want? Elena hid the card. Nothing, she lied. He just apologized for the scene. Her denial was a whisper against the thunder of Victoria's accusation. Her sister advanced, fury twisting her beautiful face into something ugly. She declared Adrian Voloff a man who never apologized, a man who never acted without purpose, demanding to know his endgame. When Elena tried to sidestep the question, Victoria's composure shattered into hysteria, a torrent of her own fears now aimed at her sister. She shrieked of a jealousy that had poisoned their lives, of a deliberate plot to ruin her. A profound, soul-deep weariness washed over Elena, the exhaustion of an actress trapped in a terrible, repeating play. She denied everything, claiming she barely knew the man. Victoria pressed, her voice sharp, asking why then had he singled Elena out, her fists clenched, white-knuckled signs of a rage about to boil over. Then came the venom, the old words meant to wound, labeling Elena the invisible daughter, a ghost meant to be silent and unseen. But the barbs that once drew blood now found no purchase. In her pocket, the weight of the token was a new reality, a choice that had rewired her world. You're not wrong, she said, her voice a startling island of calm. I have been invisible. I think I've decided I don't want to be anymore. She walked past her sister, leaving the library and moving through the hall, where the sounds of battle still echoed. She climbed the back stairs to her room, a third-floor chamber with just enough space for a bed and desk, a room for someone who was meant to take up no space at all, and studied Adrian's card. It was brutally simple, black ink on heavy stock, a phone number that was not just a number, but a crossroads between this life and another. 1 year. Freedom. Outside her door, she could hear her mother's rage and her father's futile attempts to contain the crisis. The entire house seemed to thrum with the aftershock of Adrian's decision. Yet for the first time, the chaos couldn't touch her. Elena felt herself floating above her family's wreckage, seeing it clearly instead of drowning in it. Her mind drifted to a book on landscape architecture, of creating gardens from industrial decay, spaces that existed only because someone fought for their right to be beautiful. An idea bloomed. Perhaps she could be her own reclaimed space, a life she had to fight for. Elena stared at the number on the card in her hand. To call now would be a clean break, a desperate leap before the fear could set in and paralyze her. The other path was to wait for the contract, to act like a rational adult. But rationality had been her prison, the logic that kept her in a tiny room inside a family who barely saw her. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she lowered the phone and reached for her laptop. A move this final required intelligence. She had to know who Adrian Volov was behind the public facade, to understand the world she was about to step into, to know what lines could not be crossed. She spent 3 hours digging. By the end, she had a much clearer picture of the man offering her an escape, and none of it was comforting. Adriana Volkov's empire was built on unforgiving strategy and perfectly executed risk. People who crossed him faced consequences that were legally clean but personally devastating. He operated in the shadows of the law, a man who understood that what is legal is not always what is just. His capacity for creating ruin wasn't a rumor, it was a well-documented fact for those who knew where to look. Most people would have been terrified. Instead, Elena felt something close to relief. The logic was cold and clear. A man this dangerous possessed the power to see his promises through. If she was trading one cage for another, this new one at least had an expiration date and a payment at the end. At midnight, her phone lit up with an email from an unknown address, a PDF attached. The subject line was stark: "Contract for review." Elena started the download and began to read. 27 pages of dense legal language required her to constantly look things up. The core tenets, however, were brutally clear. 12 months starting from the day of their marriage. The contract stipulated a shared home but separate bedrooms, required appearances at social and corporate functions, and demanded total financial transparency from both of them. The number listed as compensation made Elena's hand shake. It also detailed termination clauses for breach of contract, a no-fault exit at 6 months if they both agreed, and non-disclosure agreements as strong as steel. It was the most intimate and impersonal document she had ever seen. A simple note was typed at the bottom. "My legal team is available to you. Feel free to retain your own. Take all the time you need. A.V." Elena read the entire contract 3 more times, highlighting clauses, searching for the trap she knew must be there. An escape like this, she thought, always came with a hidden price. But the terms were shockingly fair, almost protective, hinting that Adrian's desire for a partnership, not a pawn, might have been real. At 2 a.m, Elena heard the floorboards creak outside her door, a soft knock, followed by her mother's voice devoid of all warmth. "Elena, we need to talk." Elena didn't move a muscle. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. They would be back. The next day would be a gauntlet of family meetings, of punishments and accusations. Victoria would play the victim. Her parents would wield guilt and obligation like weapons. The whole family machine would grind into motion to force Elena back into her small, silent box. But for this one night, alone in her room with the contract glowing on her screen, Elena had something they couldn't take away. She had a choice. At dawn, Elena made coffee before anyone else was awake. Sitting in the breakfast nook, overlooking the garden, she watched the light spill over the lawns, cared for by 3 gardeners, her father's trophies, her mother's proof of success. The symbols meant nothing to her. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to the number from Adrian's card. "I have questions about the contract. When can we talk?" The reply came in 30 seconds. "My office, 2 p.m. today. Address to follow." Elena finished her coffee and went back to her room. She packed a single bag, not with everything, but with the things that mattered. A picture of her grandmother, who died when Elena was 12. The last person who had ever truly looked at her. A few books, her laptop, and clothes her mother hadn't picked out. She didn't know if she would need the bag, but packing it felt like a vow. At 8, her mother knocked again, harder this time. "Elena Whitmore, open this door now." Elena opened it. Catherine stood there, perfectly dressed, her makeup a flawless mask, her emotional armor securely fastened. "We need to discuss last night." "There's nothing to discuss. Adrian ended his engagement to Victoria. That has nothing to do with me." "Don't play innocent. It's an ugly look on you." Catherine swept past her into the room, her eyes landing on the bag on the bed. "What is that for?" "It's nothing." "You are not going anywhere." Her mother's face turned to ice. "Whatever little fantasy you were spinning about last night is over. This family is in crisis because of what that man did. You will not make it worse with some childish stunt. I'm 24. I can do what I want." "You are 24 with no money, no prospects, and no idea how the real world works." Catherine sat on the edge of the bed as if it were a throne. "You think you're a prisoner here? Go on. Try to make it on your own. Let's see how long your little rebellion lasts when you can't pay your rent." It was the trap Elena had felt around her ankles for years. The cold, hard fact that freedom required a price she couldn't afford. The money she earned wasn't enough to live on. Her degree was useless. Her only work experience came from jobs her father had arranged for her. Before Adrian Voloff became the catalyst, Elena was already showing signs of withering in her environment. A contract promising money became the spark for a revolution in her life. Her quiet assurance, "I'll be fine," was a lie even to her own ears, a statement her mother, Catherine, immediately shot down, predicting utter ruin. Catherine's command to ignore the man was a last-ditch effort to keep control, painting Adrian as a predator in a game too complex for Elena. After the fight, the psychological weight became unbearable. Her life felt like a slow suffocation. The choice to leave, stepping out at 1:30 in a dress she had taken from her sister, Victoria, was the final shattering of her lifelong obedience, an open declaration of war against her family. The office Adrian had chosen was a monument to quiet menace, an architecture of glass and steel that screamed its immense restrained power. In its chambers, a sterile hush amplified the unspoken threat. After a scan confirmed her identity, a lone elevator cocooned her for the ascent, a 40-story climb engineered to magnify his advantage. At the summit, she was shown into a room with a conqueror's view of the city. There, Adrian was ending a call in Russian, another casual broadcast of his global reach. He let the silence hang before acknowledging her, gesturing to the contracts on the table. "You came," he stated, a soft test of her nerve. Her reply, "I have questions," was the first quiet pushback in his meticulously controlled world. What followed was the ghost of a negotiation. Elena, consulting her notes, opened with Clause 7, subsection 3, a vague mandate on social appearances. For the next hour, she witnessed a surgical dissection of the agreement. Adrian's tactic was one of absolute candor. He answered every question, even patching in his lawyer by video to translate the arcane language of the law. It was a performance meant to build a fragile illusion of partnership and trust. His offer to pay for her own legal counsel was a masterstroke, reinforcing the mirage. By the end, she had 12 pages of notes and an exhausted mind. Her last question, aimed at his true motives, tore past the pretense of their brief, civil exchange. In reply, Adrian offered a narrative of calculated solitude. He described his life as a fortress built brick by brick for maximum benefit, a confession of bloodless, functional purpose. He then cast her as a beautiful glitch in his system, a person who wasn't calculating back. Her raw honesty was to him a refreshing interaction. This was a classic reframing of the megalomaniac. His emotional void was not flaw, but a cross he bore, and she was the cure he hadn't sought. Elena recognized it as loneliness. He granted her the point, then swiftly recaptured his ground. Lonely with resources is better. He steered back to the contract, calling it a business arrangement. Her way out of a life he had correctly seen was suffocating her. He had seen her at the family dinner, he said, and diagnosed her as drowning. His contract, the life raft. Its terms were stark: 12 months of shared advantage followed by a clean break. A war raged in Elena's mind as she pictured the fallout. The shunning by her family, the public scorn. Adrian made no effort to deny these possibilities. He affirmed them. It will be uncomfortable and complicated, he agreed, framing the torment as the price of her financial freedom. This is a critical stage in a captive's bond where the jailer offers a treacherous path out of an older, deeper prison. Weighing his offer against a slow death of invisibility, she chose the monster she did not know. I need one change to the contract. Her voice was steady. He asked, which one? Clause 17, the section on termination. It must specify that if either of us develops genuine romantic feelings, the deal is instantly nullified, without penalty, bypassing the 6-month waiting period. A flicker of something like surprise crossed Adrian's features. Do you see that as a likely risk? I see it as preparing for every outcome. Elena held his gaze, her spine a rod of steel. This works only if we both remain clear about what it is. The moment it changes, it's over. Is that understood? He considered this for a long moment, then gave a sharp, definitive nod. Understood. I'll have my lawyer add the clause. I will then need 24 hours for my attorney to review the final document. Elena stood, a sudden need to be in motion, as if testing her own freedom to leave. If it's acceptable, I will sign. If not, this meeting never happened. She picked up her bag, noticing her hands were perfectly still. Either way, you'll have my answer by Friday. Adrian rose as well, offering his hand in a gesture of finality. Friday, then. Elena took it. His grip was strong but not confining. For a second, they stood frozen, two figures contemplating a future that defied all reason yet felt strangely fated. May I ask you something? She said, turning to leave. Of course. Why not just tell Victoria the truth from the start, that you weren't interested? A brief, mirthless smile touched Adrienne's lips. Because she never asked what I wanted. She asked what I could give her. There's a difference. Elena walked out of the building into the afternoon sun, her purse on her shoulder, her phone buzzing with frantic texts from her mother. The city throbbed around her, a beast with millions of lives entirely separate from her own. She felt both terror and a wild sense of release. By Friday, she had to choose: drown in the life that was killing her, or leap into the deep with a man who offered to teach her how to swim. Elena walked with no destination, needing only to feel the ground moving beneath her. Between that office and wherever she stopped, she knew the choice was already behind her. She had made it when she packed her bag. The lawyer she hired, Martha Castiano, was a $300 an hour force of nature. She had gray hair in a bun that looked sharp enough to wound, reading glasses on a silver chain, and eyes that had seen every possible version of human foolishness. This is either the smartest move you've ever made, or the most self-destructive, Martha declared, setting the contract down after a 2-hour examination. I can't yet tell which. Elena sat across from her in an office that smelled of aged paper and strong coffee. That's not very reassuring. It's not meant to be. You're marrying a man you barely know for money with an expiration date. Nothing about this should feel reassuring. Martha pointed to a tabbed section. That said, the agreement itself is surprisingly solid. Whoever wrote this tried to protect you both, which is rare. Usually these things are traps. So you think I should sign it? I think you should understand what you are signing. Martha slid over a legal pad covered in notes. The payment structure is generous, but fair. The exit clauses give you multiple ways out if things go south. The non-disclosure agreements shield you as much as they shield him. But, Elena, this is still a massive gamble. You're legally tying yourself to a man with a reputation for corporate savagery. If he decides to break this contract, you have legal recourse. But legal recourse doesn't heal psychological wounds. Elena had spent 3 days obsessed with this single choice. 3 days ignoring her family's frantic calls, sleeping on her friend Maya's couch, trying to imagine a future that didn't feel like a panic attack. What would you do if you were me? A thin, knowing smile played on Martha's lips. I would weigh what I'm running from against what I'm running to. If the thing you're escaping is worse than the risk ahead, you're making a mistake. But if you're running toward something greater than what you're leaving behind, then maybe the gamble is worth it. That's quite a philosophical take for a lawyer. I'm a person of many layers. Martha pushed the document across the polished wood. Professionally, I find this agreement ironclad, with terms as favorable as one could hope for. Personally, I see more life in your eyes discussing this radical scheme than I have in a long time. Make of that what you will. That afternoon, in the quiet of Martha's office, Elena signed the contract, her name looking foreign and small on the line. With Martha as witness, copies were made and filings were confirmed. The process took 20 minutes. It upended her entire future. One last thing, Martha said as Elena stood to leave. That clause about romantic feelings voiding the deal, it's clever, but be careful. The line between playing a part and living it can blur. Don't lie to yourself about where you stand. The warning sat like a stone in Elena's stomach on the drive back to Maya's apartment. Her phone was a beacon of ignored pleas. 17 missed calls from her mother, 9 from Victoria, and 1 from her father that she knew was a thinly veiled threat. She swiped them all away, sending a single text to Adrian. Contract is signed. What's next? The response was immediate. We make it legal tomorrow, 10 a.m., City Hall. Bring your ID and the contract. I'll handle the rest. Elena stared at the screen. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, she would marry a man she had met on 2 occasions. The sheer madness of it should have sent her running. Instead, what she felt was something dangerously close to relief. Maya found her on the apartment's tiny balcony, watching the river of traffic below. You look like you're deciding between throwing up or throwing yourself over. I'd prefer neither. I signed it. Elena showed her the phone. We're doing it tomorrow. Christ. Maya sank into the other plastic chair, which groaned in protest. Right, okay. This is happening. Do you have anything to wear? You can't get married in jeans. It's just a formality. It's not a real wedding. It's real enough to bind you legally. You'll wear something decent. Maya was on her feet, a general taking command of a battlefield. Come on, we're going shopping. Maya, I don't have the money for my treat. Consider it a wedding present for the craziest decision of your life. She hauled Elena to her feet. Besides, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. You will walk into that city hall looking like you chose this, not like you're being led to the gallows. They found a dress in a boutique Maya knew, a simple cream shift that looked intentional. When the sales clerk asked if it was for a special occasion, Maya announced a courthouse wedding with so much authority that the woman offered them champagne, which they both refused. Back at the apartment, Elena put the dress on again, studying her reflection in Maya's mirror. She looked like someone playing the part of a woman whose life was not her own. Or maybe, for the first time, she looked like someone stepping into a life that finally fit. "You're sure about this?" Maya asked, her frame filling the doorway. "Because you can still walk away. You could stay here, get a job, build something else. Marrying a stranger isn't the only way to escape your family." "I'm not just escaping them. I'm buying myself time to figure out who I am without them." Elena turned away from the mirror. 12 months, that's all it is. A year of breathing room and enough money at the end to start for real. And if this whole thing blows up, at least I tried something, instead of just slowly suffocating in that house for the rest of my life. Elena dropped onto the bed, a wave of exhaustion hitting her. "I'm so tired of being invisible, Maya. Tired of being the daughter they never wanted, the sister they forgot. This is insane, but it's my insanity. I'm choosing it. That has to be worth something." Maya sat down next to her, their shoulders touching. A familiar comfort from their college days, when Elena was the quiet one, and Maya was the force of nature who had simply decided they were friends. The agreement is confirmed, with assurances of protection given. A warning is delivered concerning the subject, Adrian, and the mind-altering nature of power. Subject Elena then entered a state of severe insomnia, her mind trapped in a loop of disastrous potential outcomes from the new arrangement. By dawn, she had envisioned over 30 scenarios for failure, but felt no regret for her choice. At 900 hours, she donned the designated cream outfit and applied makeup to create a facade of control. The final image was a careful balance of poised composure and raw nerves. At 9:30, a summons came from Adrian by text. After a tense embrace with her friend, Elena went down to a waiting vehicle, an unmarked luxury sedan. A driver let her into the passenger compartment, a space furnished in materials that cost more than everything she owned. The drive to the municipal building took 15 minutes. Through polarized glass, subject Elena watched the city blur past, her mind struggling to grasp the reality of the coming event. Her legal union with Adrian Volkov. He was already there when she arrived, standing in the building's steps in a dark suit that made his formidable presence seem even larger. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his features as she stepped out of the car, a subtle break from his usual controlled calm. He offered a generic compliment on her appearance that still managed to land with surprising weight. Elena returned the empty pleasantry and took her place beside him, clutching her handbag like an anchor. She confessed to a state of profound anxiety. He answered by validating her fear as a sign of clear perception before guiding her toward the entrance. He laid out the mechanics of their 10-minute appointment, brief vows, signatures, and filing, stressing its transactional nature. Then he walked into the building, and she followed. The officiant, a woman in her 50s, moved with an air of professional weariness born from witnessing countless such rituals. She checked their identities and documents before leading them into a small room bathed in the hum of fluorescent lights. She asked about rings, clearly expecting them to have none. Adrian confirmed they did not. The clerk produced a laminated card bearing the standard vows, mentioning its 5-minute length and offering a moment for personal words, an offer they both rejected with a shared silent glance. They were told to stand opposite each other as the clerk began her monotone recitation of legal preamble. Subject Elena felt herself detaching from the moment, the words becoming a distant drone. Her mind focused instead on the sheer surrealism of the room and the catastrophic, life-altering pact she was making with a man she barely knew. "Do you, Adrian Volkov, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the clerk asked. His reply, "I do," landed with the finality of a gavel sealing a business deal. The question then turned to her. "Do you, Elena Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" It was her last chance to escape. A tremor of panic seized her. The words, "I do," left her lips, a point of no return. A document appeared, and they signed. His name, a bold slash of ink. Hers, a careful, trembling script. With the clerk's signature, it was done. "Congratulations, you're legally married," he announced, ushering them out for the next appointment. They walked into the daylight in silence, the certificate clutched in her hand like a verdict. She was bound to Adrian Volkov, the entire reckless act taking less time than a trip to the store. On the courthouse steps, Adrian turned, his words a series of commands. A car would take her to his home. An assistant would meet her there. A mandatory meeting at 1200 hours meant he couldn't go with her, but he would see her that evening to discuss arrangements. Elena's voice was faint. "You're leaving?" He merely restated his schedule, deferring her to his man, Marcus. His phone was already in hand, his focus on a screen filled with appointments. He assured her the staff expected her before turning toward his own car, leaving her with the marriage license, a processed asset in an efficient machine. His name was a whisper on her lips, just enough to make him stop. He paused with his hand on the car door. "This is not normal," she managed to say. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We agreed to terms that were not normal. Until tonight." And then he was gone, his car disappearing into the flow of traffic. Elena was left with a man named Marcus, a mountain of quiet muscle who opened a car door for her. "Mrs. Volkov," he said. The name felt alien, a label stitched onto her skin. 24 years as Elena Whitmore, undone in a 5-minute transaction. The 40-minute drive took them from the city's heart to a secluded, wealthy enclave. They passed through private gates to a house of glass and stone, a monument to controlled power. Marcus spoke for the first time without being prompted. Mr. Volkov designed it himself. Elena recognized the architecture from magazines. All clean lines and expensive materials, a world away from the false history of her family's estate. This home made no apologies for its wealth. Marcus pulled into a circular drive where a woman in her 60s was waiting. Poised and severe, she had the air of one who managed kings. "Mrs. Volkov," the woman greeted as Elena stepped out. "I am Sarah Chen, the house manager. Welcome." Her footsteps echoed on the polished floors as she led Elena inside. The interior was a vast, minimalist space filled with soaring ceilings and stark, deliberate art. Sarah began a tour of the main floor, kitchen, dining room, library, and Adrian's office, a place she was told that was off limits. Sarah detailed the second floor's geography. Elena's suite was in the east wing, his in the west, 2 separate kingdoms under one roof. There was also a gym and a pool. Up a floating staircase, Sarah opened the door to Elena's new quarters. The room was immense, at least 3 times the size of her old bedroom, with a wall of glass and starkly beautiful furniture. The bathroom was a study in marble and chrome, the walk-in closet larger than some city apartments. Sarah explained that while her things were on their way, Mr. Volkov had already provided for her. A closet was stocked with a basic wardrobe in her size. Toiletries were already arranged. "Should you require anything else," Sarah concluded, "it will be provided." Elena stared out the window at the perfectly manicured gardens. "This is overwhelming," she breathed. "Yes, I imagine so." Sarah's voice was flat, neither kind nor cruel. "Mr. Volkov explained the terms of your arrangement. I have worked for him for 8 years. He is demanding, but he is fair. Follow the rules, respect his privacy, and you'll have no trouble." "What are the rules?" "Do not enter his office. Do not discuss his business with anyone. Do not make plans for him. Your rooms are your own. The common areas will be kept tidy. Dinner is at 7 when he is home, though you are not required to join him outside of social functions. The staff includes myself, Marcus, a chef, a housekeeper, and a gardener. We are all loyal to Adrian. Any questions?" Elena had 1,000, but none this woman could answer. "When will I meet the staff?" "As needed. We are here to help, not to intrude." With that, Sarah moved to leave. "You may settle in. The intercom is by the door should you need me. Dinner is at 7, either with Adrian or in your room." After Sarah left, the silence in the vast room was crushing. Her phone suddenly lit up with 17 messages from her family, their frantic words clawing at her. The final one was from her father, a command to return home immediately, treating her like a rebellious child. With a numb finality, she texted her mother, "I'm not coming back. I'm married. Don't contact me again." And then she turned the phone off. The hours that followed were filled with a profound and hollow quiet. Elena unpacked the few boxes from her old life, feeling like an imposter in the opulent room. The closet held an assortment of clothes in her size, simple, expensive pieces. In the bathroom, she found her preferred brand of toiletries, a chillingly intimate detail that felt both considerate and like a violation. At 6:30, she faced the wardrobe, agonizing over what to wear for dinner with her new husband. Everything felt wrong. Too casual, too formal, too much. She chose dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, armor of normalcy for the night ahead, and went downstairs feeling like a trespasser. Adrian was in the kitchen talking to the chef, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up. This relaxed version of him was somehow more intimidating. "You found your way," he said, stating a fact, not asking a question. "Sarah is very thorough." Elena lingered in the doorway, unsure where to stand or what to do. He gestured toward the dining table, already set for 2. "Don't hover. Sit." He told her the chef, Thomas, was a 5-year veteran who took his work personally, so she should pretend to enjoy the food. Thomas offered a tight smile and vanished. Elena sat, watching as Adrian served her plate before his own, a strange pantomime of married life that made her stomach turn. "Tell me about your afternoon," Adrian asked, cutting into his fish with surgical skill. "Strange, disorienting. I turned off my phone. My family was becoming a problem." She pushed food around her plate. "And your meeting?" "Productive." He ate with an unnerving efficiency, consuming the meal as if it were simply fuel. "Your family's campaign will escalate. They'll show up here eventually or find other ways to make contact. How you respond is your decision. I won't get involved unless you ask. Their reaction to our marriage will be severe. Their reaction to me ending the engagement with Victoria was already severe. This is just the next chapter. Adrian set down his fork, his eyes locking with hers. You need to understand this, Elena. Your family will use every psychological tool they have. Guilt, obligation, money, public shame. They will say, I'm controlling you, that you're destroying yourself. Some of what they say might even be true, but the contract you signed gives you power. Don't let them make you forget that. Elena swallowed a bite of salmon, the exquisite flavor completely lost on her. Why are you being supportive about this? You could just order me to handle it. I could, but we have to live together for the next 12 months. Your continued unhappiness would be inefficient. He went back to his meal. I have experience with family empires run like corporations. I know their rules of engagement. Does yours operate similarly? A shudder fell over Adrian's features. My family is off limits, per Section 12 of our agreement. The sudden chill in his voice made Elena recoil. Understood. I apologize. A heavy silence descended, shattering their fragile connection. As Elena searched for a way to salvage the evening, Adrian shifted gears. A charity ball is scheduled for next Friday. It is black tie. Your attendance is mandatory for business. It will be our first public outing as a married couple. His tone was clinical, as if detailing a medical appointment. You are required to be there and to appear suitably pleased. Can you manage that? I can perform happiness for a few hours, yes. Excellent. My assistant will brief you on attire, timing, and key guests. These events are a necessary evil. Try to conceal your boredom. I will do my best not to be a liability, Elena replied. Her words laced with frost. Adrian's eyes narrowed. That is not what I implied. Wasn't it? You needed someone to play a role convincingly. I am the asset you purchased for that purpose. I did not purchase you. We made a deal. He set his silverware down with deliberate, final precision. And I have no doubt you will be an asset. I expect you'll impress even yourself. But you must stop inventing slights where none are intended. Heat bloomed in Elena's cheeks. You're right. My apologies. This is all just a lot. It is. His voice lost some of its edge. But this was always the arrangement, the beginning of the most difficult part. They finished the meal with the safe, empty talk of strangers, the house, the city, the simple mechanics of sharing a space. It was a negotiation between two cohabitants because that is exactly what they were. Elena retreated to her room, using the house phone to call Maya. Give me a situation report, Maya said instantly. Alive? A prisoner? Should I deploy the exit plan? I am operational. The house is obscene. The staff is efficient. I just ate dinner with my husband, a man I don't know, and the silence was deafening. Elena fell back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. This is an abnormal situation, Maya. Abnormal, but so far I'm handling it. Ask me again in 1 week after I've played the part of the blissful wife at some gala. You'll be brilliant. Just channel Victoria when you need to perform. That is terrible advice, which means it will probably work. A short, humorless laugh escaped Elena. I miss normal. Normal was a sinking ship. This is not normal, but it's a change of course. Maya paused. Check in with me daily. I need more than your word that you're okay. After the call, Elena lay in the unfamiliar bed, trying to justify her choice. Tomorrow she would move from surviving to strategizing. Tomorrow she would be stronger. Tonight she just felt small, anxious, and utterly homeless. She must have slept because the sun cutting through its curtains jolted her awake to the hard fact of the day before. She was married. She lived in Adrian Volkov's mansion. Her old life had been surgically removed and replaced with this. Her phone, now on, showed 43 missed calls and 62 messages. Most were from her family, the tone shifting from worried to furious to threatening. 3, however, were from Victoria. She forced herself to read them. The first, "How could you do this to me?" The second, "They've announced your marriage. You're a joke, a cheap replacement." The third, "I hope tearing our family apart was worth it. We all saw your jealousy, and now you've proven it." Elena deleted all 3 messages and blocked the number. She had no energy for Victoria's rage. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in." Sarah entered carrying a tray with coffee, fruit, and warm pastries. A member of the household staff informed her that Mr. Volkov would be occupied until dinner. His assistant, Claire, was set to call at 10 to discuss the gala. When asked what she required, Elena requested a car, needing to escape the residence for a time. A vehicle was arranged. Elena drove to an anonymous cafe and began a deep dive into Adrian. His business empire was an even more complex web than she had realized, with tendrils in property, tech, and venture capital. He served on 3 corporate boards, ran 2 charities, and had a reputation as a brilliant and ruthless operator. Photographs depicted him with a rotating cast of beautiful women, all of whom seemed ornamental and temporary. No companion ever appeared twice. No real attachment was ever documented. The data pointed to a deliberate avoidance of any true emotional bond, which aligned with his philosophy of calculated arrangements, a conclusion that settled heavily in her chest. The call from Claire came at precisely 1000 hours, her voice a study in crisp efficiency. She was Adrian's assistant, responsible for managing Elena's public-facing duties, beginning with the Friday gala. She detailed a protocol of dress fittings, appointments, and intelligence files on the other guests. The dossiers were background on key figures and their strategic value to Adrian, presented as essential tools for navigating the social terrain. Claire's tone made the whole process sound routine. A stylist would arrive at 2 the next day with clothing selections. Adrian's preference was irrelevant, so long as the final look was deemed appropriate. The precision of it all was impressive. "It is my job," the assistant said, her voice clinical. The files would arrive by email tonight for her review before Friday. When asked if she had questions, Elena said nothing. "No, excellent." The connection severed, leaving her in the cafe feeling like a line item on a ledger. Adrienne's world was a seamless machine, every surface polished, every movement calculated for cold efficiency. Instead of comfort, she felt erased by it. A single anonymous gear in an apparatus she couldn't comprehend. The afternoon bled away as she walked, a ghost drifting through the city's veins. It was a small, desperate grab for freedom, a moment where no one watched or made demands. For a few hours, she was just another face in the tide of humanity. When she returned near 5 that evening, a box waited on her bed. Inside, a plastic card bore her new name above a note penned in a precise hand. "For whatever you need, no limit, no questions." She stared at the card. No limit. With it, she held access to a kind of power she had never imagined. The sheer scale of that power felt obscene. She slid the card into her wallet, deliberately shutting down any thought of the man who could grant such a thing without a second glance. A heavy silence settled over dinner. Exhaustion was etched on both their faces, Adrian's and Elena's. They ate pasta and traded empty words, their shared weariness a strange sort of truce that lowered their guards. "How was your first day as Mrs. Vuloff?" he asked, pouring a wine she accepted with a tremor of doubt. "Surreal. I used your credit card for coffee and felt like a criminal." She drank wine that likely cost more than her former weekly budget. Claire called about the gala. "She's terrifyingly efficient. She's the only thing holding my life together. Otherwise, I would drown in the details." He seemed to shed his corporate armor, his posture softening. "Your role at the gala is simple. Stay near me, smile when appropriate, and let me handle the politics. That is the entirety of your job. Just look content. That's the only requirement. I am not asking for a miracle, Elena. Just be there and don't look miserable." He watched her for a beat. "Unless that's too much to ask." "No, I can manage that." She placed her wine glass down. "May I ask a question?" "That depends on the question. Why don't you have any friends?" "In all my research, every article mentions only associates and allies, but no one who seems genuinely close to you." Adrian was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Friendship requires trust, and trust is a liability I cannot afford." "That sounds unbearably lonely." "It is, but loneliness is a controllable variable. People are not." He began to clear the table, a task usually left to staff. "I learned long ago that caring for people gives them power to destroy you. It is more efficient not to care. Is that what you think this is?" Her gesture encompassed the space between them. "A arrangement where neither of us has to care. Isn't that what this is?" She had no answer. They cleared the table in silence, their motions synchronized but empty, like dancers performing a ballet without music. When they finished, Adrienne vanished into his office, and Elena went up to her room. In the dark, she thought about trust and loneliness and the paradox of building a life with someone while keeping them at arm's length. She had agreed to 12 months of this very thing, controlled, bounded, with no emotional risk. But a warning she'd once received echoed in her mind. Sometimes the line between the role you play and the person you are blurs into nothing. She fell asleep, wondering which side of that line she was on and if she'd even know the difference when it finally vanished. The stylist arrived at 2 o'clock on the dot, carrying an armory of garment bags. Her name was Simone, and her effortless grace made Elena feel like an intruder in her own home. "Claire sent your measurements and the event file," Simone said, laying dresses on the bed with a surgeon's focus. "A black-tie charity gala. The crowd is conservative, but not dead. You must look like you belong. We'll find what works." Elena tried on 7 dresses before Simone approved the 8th, a deep emerald silk gown that whispered of wealth without shouting. The fit was perfect, a fact that felt more like an intrusion than a success, proof that her body had been cataloged without her knowledge. "This is the one," Simone declared. "It's elegant. It will photograph beautifully, and the color loves your skin. Adrian will approve." "Does he usually approve of your choices?" Elena asked, staring at her altered reflection. "Adrian doesn't care about fashion. He cares that people appear appropriate for their setting." Simone opened a jewelry box. "These are on loan from a friend who owes me. Simple emerald earrings. Nothing to fight the dress. Your goal is not to be the most memorable person there. Your goal is to be appropriately invisible at his side." The phrase struck her with an unexpected violence. Appropriately invisible. She had spent a lifetime perfecting that very skill. Now she was being paid to perform it. After Simone left with the rejected gowns and promised to send shoes, Elena found the digital briefing from Claire. 43 pages of dossiers on the gala's guests, who they were, what they did, how they connected to Adrian's empire, and a list of forbidden topics. It read like an intelligence report, which was likely the point. She was halfway through memorizing the file on a developer named Marcus Chen when Adriana materialized in her doorway, still dressed in his suit from the day's battles. "Simone found something that works?" he asked. "Apparently. She said you would approve, which is a statement I'm trying not to dissect." She closed the laptop. "Do you always have your assistant send out 40-page intelligence briefings on party guests?" "Only for events where the conversations matter." He leaned on the doorframe, the fatigue in his posture making him look almost mortal. "Have you read the file on Senator Morrison, the man blocking my financial district project?" "Yes. His wife, Caroline Morrison, will be there. She is the true power in that marriage, and she has a deep interest in landscape architecture." Adrienne's expression shifted, sharpening into something strategic. If you could speak with her about urban green spaces, she might soften her position on the project, or at the very least, withdraw her opposition. Elena stared at him. "You want me to manipulate a senator's wife using my passion for parks? I want you to have a genuine conversation about a topic you truly care about. If my objectives happen to benefit, that is merely a matter of efficiency." He made the directive sound perfectly logical. "You don't have to if it makes you uncomfortable, but you're better equipped to talk to Caroline Morrison than I am. Because she likes plants and I am a woman. Because she is tired of men trying to maneuver her. And you have an authentic passion for the subject, not an agenda." Adrienne pushed off the frame. "But as I said, it's your choice. I won't ask you to do anything you find objectionable." He left her alone with the ugliness of his proposition. He was asking her to weaponize her own sincerity, a request far more disturbing than a simple demand for a lie. But he had also offered her an out, a sliver of respect for her boundaries that she hadn't seen coming. She returned to the dossier, her eyes finding the section on Caroline Morrison. The woman held a master's in environmental policy, sat on 3 conservation boards, and had killed 2 other major developments. She was not a woman who would be easily charmed or fooled. This meant Adrian was either testing Elena's abilities, or he genuinely believed a moment of authenticity could succeed where all his power had failed. She couldn't decide which possibility was more terrifying. The following 3 days settled into a routine that felt almost normal, as long as Elena didn't think too hard. Adriana left early, returned for dinner most nights, and they would talk about safe, empty things that required nothing of them. The first days of their cohabitation moved with a cool, transactional rhythm. Their conversations were brief, functional, and devoid of any real connection. Yet Elena found herself developing a hyper-awareness of his presence. She began noticing him in quiet moments, subconsciously mapping his path through the house. The boundary between her contractual obligation and an emerging reality was starting to blur, a development her friend Martha had predicted would leave her feeling unmoored. The impending Friday event loomed with the dread of an execution date, forcing her to call her friend, Maya, who delivered a familiar pep talk. The patient expressed profound feelings of inadequacy. Her friend attempted to bolster her by citing her legal connection to Adrian Volkov, framing her as an equal to the other wives attending. The friend then admitted the pep talk was clumsy. The core instruction was to project confidence. At 4 o'clock, the artisans of her public image arrived. The team worked with tactical precision, referencing the guest list as they sculpted Elena's face and hair. By 6, she was an elevated version of herself, which was the stated mission. At 6:30, Adrian appeared, dressed in an expensive tuxedo. He stopped, and for a split second, an unreadable expression crossed his features. "You look good," he said, the understatement so vast it almost made Elena laugh. The credit goes to Simone and her team. She picked up a clutch that matched the dress and asked if he was ready to perform. He confirmed he was. He extended his arm with a mechanical gesture that spoke of a tedious, often repeated ritual. The directive had been simple: make no effort to charm anyone. Her only job was to exist and conceal any sign of distress. All other performance was unnecessary. The party was held at a historic mansion, rented to give the illusion of old money. The driveway was choked with expensive cars, and a gauntlet of photographers waited with flashing cameras. Adrian kept a hand on the small of her back, a touch that felt less like guidance and more like ownership. "Smile," he murmured as flashes began. He called this the easy part. Inside, the scene was exactly what Elena had imagined. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceilings, a string quartet played, and servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and overpriced appetizers. The guests wore their wealth in the form of designer labels and heavy jewels, all part of the elaborate theater of social standing. A woman in her 50s named Catherine appeared, greeting Adrian with kisses to both cheeks. "And you," she said, her eyes on Elena, "must be the mysterious bride everyone is whispering about." "Psst." Adrian's voice was a low murmur. "Catherine Hayes, this is Elena Vulov. Catherine is the director of the foundation we're supporting tonight." Elena offered a polite smile. Catherine's own smile was warm, but her eyes were sharp, analytical. "I have to say, hearing Adrian was married came as quite a shock. He's been the most determined bachelor I've ever known," Elena replied, the lie flowing with unnerving smoothness. "Sometimes the right person changes your mind." "So it would seem?" Catherine's gaze shifted between the two of them, trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. "Well, welcome to the circus. The galas are dreadful but necessary. At least the wine is good." As she drifted into the crowd, Adrian leaned closer, his cologne a subtle invasion of her space. "Well done. Catherine's approval is currency here." Elena murmured back. "I'm not sure she approves. She looks suspicious." He countered. "She is always suspicious. It's what makes her good at her job." He plucked 2 champagne flutes from a passing tray, handing one to her. "See the couple by the mantel? Senator Morrison and his wife, Caroline. I'll make an introduction when the moment is right." Elena swallowed the champagne, a useless effort to calm the frantic pulse in her veins. She had spent 3 days studying dossiers on the guests, cramming for a test whose true stakes remained a mystery. It was an hour of hollow introductions and memorized lines. Adrian moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a predator, his social graces just another tool of his trade. Elena played her part, a ghost in a beautiful dress, smiling on cue while feeling utterly erased. Then Adrian's hand was on her back, a firm, guiding pressure steering her toward the Morrisons. "Senator, Mrs. Morrison, a pleasure," Adrian said, his voice a carefully measured warmth. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Elena." The senator was a large man, all political handshake and a gaze that appraised her value. His wife, Carolyn, was smaller, quieter, her features composed in a way that suggested she saw everything. "Congratulations on your marriage," Carolyn said, her tone perfectly flat. It was quite sudden, wasn't it? Elena's own voice remained steady. Certainty can arrive unexpectedly. When you know something is right, there's no reason to wait. How wonderfully impulsive. Carolyn's smile never reached her eyes. Adrian doesn't strike me as an impulsive man. People contain surprises, Adrian inserted smoothly. Elena, Mrs. Morrison does incredible work with urban conservation. I thought you two might have something in common. The redirection was so obvious, Elena almost laughed. But Caroline's expression shifted, suspicion softening into curiosity. You're interested in conservation? She asked. Landscape architecture specifically, and sustainable urban green spaces. Elena decided the truth was less exhausting than the lie. She admitted a preference for the topic over the evening's empty chatter. For the first time, Carolyn's laugh was real, transforming her entire face. A silent pact was made, acknowledging their shared boredom. She launched into the Bryant Park restoration, questioning Elena's views on native plantings. They were suddenly in a real conversation, one far removed from Adriana's agenda. As Caroline spoke with passion about biodiversity and park funding, Elena's anxiety finally dissolved. Adrienne and the senator had drifted away, leaving the two women by a window overlooking the gardens. Your husband is using you to get to me about his financial district project, Carolyn stated, her tone clinical, not accusatory. A hot flush of shame burned across Elena's cheeks. Yes, that seems likely. Everything he does is strategic. And yet, here you are, having a real conversation instead of executing his plan. Carolyn watched her, her focus sharp. That's an interesting choice. Manipulation is exhausting. I prefer to just be a person. Caroline raised her glass. For what it's worth, his project has merit, if the environmental reports check out. But his strong-arm tactics make me want to kill it on principle. Have you told him that? He doesn't listen. Men like your husband hear resistance as a reason to push harder. Carolyn's face held a weary familiarity. Maybe you can put it in a language he understands. Sometimes being direct is the best strategy. After Caroline moved on, Elena stood by the glass, unsure if she'd been given a weapon or simply passed a test. The answer, she decided, was both. You have a talent for this, a man's voice said beside her. Elena turned to a man in his 30s with expensive glasses and a knowing smirk. Apologies. David Reeves. I do some tech consulting for Adrian. Elena Volkov? The name still felt like a borrowed coat. I know who you are. Everyone here does. The mystery wife who appeared out of nowhere. His tone was friendly, but his eyes were prying. I admit I'm curious. Adrian's been fiercely unattached for as long as I've known him. We met at a charity event, talked about parks. We had more in common than we thought. Elena recited the official story, hoping it sounded real. Parks. That's possibly the most boring story I've ever heard, which makes it strangely believable. David laughed. Still, the timing is interesting, coming so soon after the whole Victoria Whitmore affair imploded. A sudden, icy chill traced its way down Elena's spine. I'm not sure what you mean. Just that it's a convenient turn of events. Adrian ends one engagement and immediately marries the sister. It invites speculation. He said it lightly, but the words were a veiled blade. Not that I'm implying anything, of course, just that in our world, perception is everything. Then they can speculate, Elena said, her voice a flat line of defense. My relationship with Adrian has nothing to do with my sister. Of course it doesn't. David's smile widened. I'm sure it's just that simple. Well, a pleasure, Elena. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. He walked away, leaving Elena gripping her champagne flute so tightly she feared it would shatter. The message had been clear. She was being watched for weakness. Adrian materialized at her side, his gaze instantly reading her tension. What was that? David Reeves. He was perfectly charming while implying our marriage was a strategic merger. Elena set her glass down before she broke it. Is this passive-aggressive dance normal for everyone, or just for the new wife? It's the standard operating procedure. This is how they fight, with veiled insults and probes for weakness, all while maintaining plausible deniability. Adrian's jaw was a hard line. What did he say exactly? Elena recounted the conversation, watching his face turn to stone, a chilling reminder of the danger he possessed. I'll handle David, he said, his voice low. Don't. That will only make it worse. It will make me look like I need protecting. The authority in her own voice surprised her. I can handle gossip. I grew up with Victoria. I know how this game is played. Adrian watched her for a long, silent moment, and something in his expression shifted. So be it. But if these whispers escalate into outright harassment, I expect to be informed. For the next hour, the performance held. Elena navigated a sea of faces, the social effort a dizzying blur. A smile, stretched painfully across her features, became a mask she held up against the crushing weight of being watched. Her departure was marked by a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with physical effort. In the car, Adrian was a silent silhouette against the passing city lights. Your work tonight was effective, he finally said. More than effective. Carolyn Morrison actually smiled, an expression I've failed to elicit in 3 months of talks. She considers you too confrontational. She thinks candor would be more fruitful than legal pressure. Adrian turned his body to face her. She told you that? She did, and added, your project has potential, so long as you handle the environmental angle correctly. Elena let her head fall back against the seat. I suspect she was testing my loyalty, seeing if I would report back or hoard the knowledge for myself. And you're telling me because the mental cost of the deception is too high, and I lack the stamina for these strategic maneuvers. Elena closed her eyes. Besides, her analysis is probably correct. Your approach does read as overly aggressive. She expected him to bristle at the criticism, but a genuine laugh escaped him. Not his practiced corporate one. That is likely the most honest feedback I have heard in years. Every one of my associates offers only carefully polished, sycophantic replies. Would you rather I begin doing the same? No. The denial was sharp, laced with a surprising intensity. No, I would not. They rode the rest of the way in a comfortable silence, which in itself felt like progress. Upon arriving, Elena kicked off the expensive heels Simone had chosen, instantly losing 3 inches of height and regaining a measure of her own identity. I am grateful for your help, Adrian said in the entryway. For tonight. It was a condition of our contract. Condition of... Elena began to climb the stairs, then stopped. Adrian, the issue David mentioned about perception and timing, will it become a problem? People will always gossip. Their theories are meaningless as long as we know our own truth. He loosened his tie, looking as profoundly tired as she felt. Get some rest. We can have a debrief in the morning if you want. Elena went to her room, slipped out of the emerald gown, and hung it away like a piece of evidence from a life she didn't yet understand. She wiped away the professional makeup and stared at her own reflection, trying to connect the operative who survived a high society gala with the woman who had spent a lifetime trying to be invisible. She was about to get into bed when her phone lit up the dark. Mia's number. Status report, Mia said. Unexpectedly well until someone suggested I was a gold digger who'd schemed my way into Adrian's orbit. Elena pulled the covers up around her like a shield. But I survived. I had a coherent discussion about landscape design and only felt the need to run screaming from the room about 3 times. I'm calling that a win. Relief softened Mia's voice. See, you can do this. I don't know if I can do it for 12 months. Everyone there is constantly acting, weighing every word, looking for an angle in every conversation. It was draining, so stop acting. Just be you and make them deal with it. Mia yawned through the phone. You don't have to play their mind games just because you're in their world now. After hanging up, Elena lay in the darkness, turning over the ideas of performance and authenticity, of what the self even is when your identity feels borrowed. She had played the part of the family ghost for so long, unseen, agreeable, inconsequential, that she had forgotten her own original programming. Maybe the next 12 months were about more than just surviving a contract. Maybe they were about discovering who Elena was when no one was telling her what to be. The thought was as terrifying as it was freeing. Sleep must have taken her because the next thing she knew was sunlight slashing through the glass and a frantic pounding on her door that screamed of crisis. Elena got out of bed and opened it to find Sarah, her face a mask of grim urgency. Your family is here, Sarah stated. All of them. They are in the driveway, insisting on seeing you, and they refuse to be turned away. A cold dread coiled in Elena's stomach. How did they find me here? Does it matter? They are here, and they are causing a scene. Their threat is to call the police if they are not allowed inside. Sarah's expression was a study in professional composure. Adrian is in his office, but he sent me to ask what you would like me to do. Elena's hands trembled as she dressed, her mind racing. She had known this confrontation was inevitable, but the timing was terrible. She needed more preparation to build the defenses required to survive her family's united front. Tell them I will be down in 5 minutes, she said. And tell Adrian. Tell him I'm handling it. Sarah nodded and left. Elena finished dressing, staring at her reflection to summon a courage that felt entirely fabricated, and walked downstairs. Through the foyer glass, she saw them. 3 cars, her father's Mercedes, her mother's Range Rover, and Victoria's BMW. Her parents stood near the door, a tableau of aristocratic rage. Victoria paced nearby, her distress not marring her perfect image as she spoke rapidly into her phone. Elena steadied her breath and opened the door. The sight of her sparked an instant reaction. Her mother's face twisted with fury. Her father stepped forward as if to physically block her path, and Victoria snapped her phone shut. What exactly have you done? Catherine's voice was a blade. Do you have any idea what you've brought down upon this family? I got married. It's a fairly common practice. Elena held her ground on the top step, using the height to her advantage. I suggest you leave. This is private property. Private property bought with dirty money by the criminal you've tied yourself to. Richard's face was purple, the veins in his neck bulging. I don't know what he promised you or how he tricked you, but this ends now. You're coming home, and we are having this farce of a marriage annulled. I am 24 years old, and I married him willingly. You have no grounds for an annulment." Elena was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I am not going back. I want no further contact. Please leave." "You ungrateful little—" Catherine started up the steps. Elena didn't move. "Don't." The word came out with more power than she'd intended. My whole life was an exercise in being thankful for scraps of affection, for the worst bedroom, for simply being tolerated by my own family. I am done being grateful for being treated like a burden. We gave you everything. Catherine's voice climbed toward a shriek. "A home and education, chances you never would have had. You gave me a room the size of a closet and demanded my gratitude. You forgot my birthday for 3 straight years. You introduced me as the other one." A footnote. Elena could feel years of buried rage surfacing. "You provided the bare minimum and expected me to worship you for it." Victoria finally spoke, her voice shaking with an emotion Elena couldn't name. "How could you marry him after what he did to me? How?" "He did nothing to you, Victoria. He ended a broken engagement, and then he married you." Victoria's perfect face seemed to crumble. "My own sister." "You knew this moment would come, didn't you? Poised to snatch a prize you believed was mine. But Adrian was never a trophy to be won. You coveted the image of him, the power, the status, the perfect accessory. You never saw the man, nor did you care to look." A profound weariness settled over Elena, the exhaustion of a lifetime playing this part. "I took nothing from you. He chose me because I saw a person, not a prize. You're lost in a fantasy if you think he feels anything real for you," Victoria's voice sliced back. "He is a means to an end. A man like Adrian Volkov doesn't wed a non-entity without an agenda." The word struck with calculated cruelty. Nobody. Elena had felt it in quiet slights, but hearing Victoria speak it aloud was a physical blow. "Perhaps I am a nobody to your world," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I would rather be nothing than spend my existence trying to be someone you could approve of. This is madness." Richard moved up another step, the scent of his cologne now an invasion. "You are coming home, Elena. Now. We will discuss this like adults when you've shed this childish rebellion. This isn't defiance. It is an exodus." Elena stood firm, fighting the instinct to recoil. "I owe you no explanation, no apology. I have made my choice. It's done." "You've made a mistake that will haunt every day of your life," Catherine hissed, her tone shifting into something far colder than a shout. "When Adrian Volkov breaks you, and he will, it is the way of men like him. Do not come crawling back to us." "I won't," Elena promised. "I can give you my word on that." The door swung open behind her, and Adrian stepped onto the porch. He didn't touch Elena, didn't even stand near, yet his mere presence warped the very fabric of the confrontation. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," he acknowledged, the perfect civility of his voice a thinly veiled threat. "I believe my wife has asked you to go. I suggest you listen." "You have no right to keep her from her family," Richard blustered, but Adrian's gaze cut him short. "I am not keeping her from anyone. Elena is an adult, making her own choices. If she desires your company, she will seek it. That she does not is also her prerogative." His tone was almost pleasant, a conversational veneer over unyielding steel. "What you will not do, however, is appear on my property issuing demands and threats. That is not how this will work. How dare you?" Catherine began, but Adrian spoke as if she hadn't made a sound. I have a recording of this entire exchange. I also have excellent lawyers who would be fascinated to explore the concepts of harassment and trespassing should this happen again. He held up his phone. Shall I call them, or can you see yourselves out? Victoria let out a sound, caught between a sob and a shriek. I hate you both. I hope you are utterly miserable together. She fled to her car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows before peeling away, leaving dark scars on the asphalt. Catherine and Richard followed, their faces a promise that this war was far from over. But for now they were gone. Elena stood on the porch watching the taillights vanish, feeling like the sole survivor of a battle that had leveled the landscape of her soul. A tremor started in her hands, the body's delayed reaction now that the danger had passed. Are you all right? Adrian's voice was quiet beside her. No, but I will be. Elena hugged her arms to her chest, a sudden cold seeping into her bones. Thank you for the backup. It wasn't necessary. Yes, it was. We're a united front, remember? He paused. For what it's worth, you handled that better than I anticipated. Most people would have fractured under that kind of emotional assault. I've had a lot of practice not fracturing. Elena turned for the door, then stopped. Adrian. Victoria called me a nobody. Is that how you see me? He watched her for a long, silent moment, his expression a mask. Nobody is what people call someone they have lost the ability to control. It isn't a description, it is a weapon. The fact that it still stings, he observed, means you haven't entirely severed your connection to their judgment. Is that a bad thing? It's a human thing. He held the door for her. Let's go inside. Thomas has made breakfast, and you look like you need caffeine to function. They sat in the silent kitchen, the simple act of eating eggs and toast calming the tremors in Elena's hands. Adrian didn't push her to talk, didn't ask for a dissection of her feelings. His presence across the table was an anchor, more solid than any empty words of comfort could be. They won't stop, Elena said into the quiet. My family doesn't surrender a fight they believe they are right about. Neither do I, Adrian replied, pouring more coffee into her cup. And I have considerably more resources than they do. If they choose to escalate this, we will handle it together. The word together sparked a strange flutter in Elena's chest. This was meant to be a contract, a transaction with defined lines. But somewhere between the public performance and the private war, something had irrevocably shifted. The dynamic was beginning to feel less like an alliance and more like a partnership. I need to walk, she announced abruptly, desperate for air, for space in her own mind. Clear my head. Take Marcus with you. After this morning, I'd prefer you had security nearby. Elena hadn't the strength to argue. She changed her clothes, and Marcus drove her to a park she had scouted before. He stayed with the car as she followed manicured paths designed to look wild. The space was filled with weekend families and oblivious couples, lost in lives untouched by her particular crisis. The anonymity was a strange comfort, a reminder that the world was larger than her pain. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya checking in. Elena sent back a short message saying she was fine, a lie that felt like the truth. She walked for an hour, letting the rhythm of her steps quiet the frantic beating of her thoughts. They had come, they had said their terrible things, and they had left. She had stood her ground. She had survived. That had to count as a victory. When she returned on the house, Adrian was in the library, his laptop open to what looked like an avalanche of emails. He glanced up when she entered. Better? He asked. Getting there. Elena sank into the chair opposite him, suddenly unwilling to be alone again. Can I ask you something personal you can always ask? I may not always answer. When was the last time you let someone really see you? Not a business partner, not an acquaintance, but the person underneath. Adrian was silent for so long that Elena thought he would refuse. Then he said, I was 19. Her name was Natasha. She died in a car accident 6 months after we met. After that, I decided the price of intimacy was too high. The words landed between them heavy and real. Elena hadn't expected such brutal honesty. She didn't know what to do with it. I'm sorry, she offered at last. It was a long time ago. Adrian closed the laptop, giving her his full, undivided attention. Why are you asking this? To understand if what we have is still a performance, if something else is taking root beneath it. Elena held his gaze. And I think you're trying to figure out the same thing. Perhaps. He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds. The contract states, it is void if romantic feelings develop, but it doesn't define the line between romance and simple human concern. Is that what you feel? Concern for me? Yes. The admission was plain, a fact he had clearly already accepted, a deviation from the plan. And yet here we are. Elena went to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him, but not touching. So, what do we do? Unclear. The logical move would be to pull back, to reinforce the boundaries, and remember the temporary nature of all this. Adrian turned to face her, but I am tired of making only the logical move. Logic has brought me incredible success, and it has left me profoundly alone. What's the alternative? We see where this goes, carefully, with our eyes wide open. His hand found hers, with a hesitation she had never seen in him before. No promises, no set path, just observation. It was perhaps the least romantic proposal she had ever heard. It was also spoken with a raw honesty that made her chest ache. Agreed, she said. We'll see where it goes. They stood by the window, hands joined like uncertain teenagers, and Elena remembered Martha's warning about the line between acting and feeling becoming blurred. She had a feeling they had crossed that line long ago without noticing, and she couldn't tell if it was her greatest mistake or the best decision she had ever made. Outside, the gardens were a study in planned perfection. Every flower and shrub was chosen for a specific purpose, a specific aesthetic. It should have looked sterile, but instead it just looked intentional. Something had been deemed important enough to get right. Maybe she and Adrian were doing the same, deciding this was important enough to try. The change in his behavior was subtle at first, easily missed if Elena hadn't been watching. Adrian started coming home earlier, staying for dinner more often. Their conversations grew longer, drifting away from safe topics and into more personal ones. They began to talk about books, old travels, things that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with being human. He asked about her communications degree. She confessed she'd wanted to study environmental design, but was told it was impractical. He mentioned a childhood where weakness was a death sentence, and she didn't ask for more. 3 weeks after the party, a package was at her door. Inside was a book on modern landscape architecture. A note in Adrian's sharp handwriting read, "Thought you might find this interesting, eh?" The smallness of the gesture created a tightness in Elena's throat she refused to examine. Someone had listened. Someone remembered. It shouldn't have felt so novel, but it did. She found him in the kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through his phone, already armored in his suit for the day. "Thank you for the book," she said, holding it up. You didn't have to do that. I know. I wanted to. He glanced up, then quickly away, as if her gratitude was something he didn't know how to handle. There's a lecture series starting at the university next month on sustainable urban design. I thought you might want to go. Elena stared at him. You looked up lecture series on landscape architecture. Claire did the research. I just asked her to. But the tips of his ears had turned red, the most human thing she had ever seen on him. If you're not interested, it's fine. It was just a thought. I would love to go. Elena sat across from him with her own coffee. Adrian, are we becoming friends? I believe that might be the case, he said, the words careful, as if testing their weight. Is that a problem? No, just unexpected. Elena traced the rim of her cup. The contract says we terminate for romantic feelings. It says nothing about friendship. Yet another variable we neglected to calculate. The corner of Adrienne's mouth lifted into the barest suggestion of a smile. Friendship might be a more potent danger than romance. Love, after all, came with obvious warning signs. But what were the markers for this? A preoccupation with another's welfare, wanting them to be happy, the ache of their absence, his eyes locked with hers. Buying a book on landscape architecture because you know it matters to someone. A peculiar tightening seized Elena's chest. Those seem like signals we ought to be monitoring. Perhaps are you going to? Not at all. His honesty was a shock, yet it felt right for this strange new space between them. And you? No. Adrian rose, collecting his things. I have a dinner meeting. I will be back late, but my schedule is open tomorrow. We could do something if you wish. Such as, I am not sure, normal people things, a meal without a corporate agenda, a movie, whatever you want. He hesitated at the door. I have forgotten how to do anything purely for pleasure. Perhaps it is a skill worth relearning. After he left, Elena remained in the kitchen with the new book, trying to map the shifting ground between them. This began as a contract. 12 months, clear lines, a mutually beneficial exchange. But somewhere, the lines had blurred into oblivion. They were becoming something unplanned, and Elena could not tell if it was a good thing or a dangerous one. It felt like both. The rest of her day was lost in Adrian's book as she took notes, sinking into ideas of space and design. It was like rediscovering a piece of her soul she had buried to be the dutiful daughter. Maya's call came that afternoon, her voice bright with forced cheer. How is married life in the mansion with the fearsome man? Complicated. Elena drifted to her room's window seat, gazing at the increasingly familiar gardens. He gave me a book, Maya, just because he thought I would like it. The scoundrel, the sheer nerve of his thoughtfulness. You understand what I mean. This was meant to be a simple, emotionless deal with a clean exit. Elena hugged her knees to her chest. But he is nothing like my initial analysis, and I doubt I am what he expected. So what is the next step? There is no data. We are just letting it unfold, which is possibly the most irrational choice I have ever made. Or the bravest, Maya countered. Your whole life has been about safety, staying invisible, not making waves. Maybe it is time you gambled on something that truly matters. After the call, Elena weighed risk against security, the unknown against the familiar misery she had left behind. Her family's brand of safety was a cage, a small room, constant dismissal, a slow, suffocating death. Adrienne was a question mark, terrifying yet alive in a way her safe world never was. The following evening, he took her to a tiny Italian place in a neighborhood she had never seen. No reservation, no tactical corner table, no clients to impress. Just two people eating pasta and talking about nothing. This is an anomaly, Elena mused, twirling linguine on her fork. Being in public with you, with no performance required. A good anomaly or a bad one? Good. Decidedly good. She studied him across the table. This titan who commanded boardrooms and cowed politicians now looked almost hesitant in this little restaurant. Do you ever do normal things just for yourself? Rarely. Nearly every action is calibrated for a specific outcome. Adrienne tore a piece of bread with methodical precision. I have been a strategist so long, I do not know how to exist without a mission. So what is tonight's mission? There is not one. That is the mission. His eyes met hers. I wanted to have dinner with you, not for business or appearances, but simply because I wanted to. The plain truth of it sent a pang through Elena's heart. No one has ever just wanted my company. My family endured me. Victoria saw a competitor. Everyone else was disinterested. You are the first person who seems to actually choose to be here with me. Then everyone else was a fool. Adrienne said it like an indisputable law of physics. You're captivating, Elena. You notice details others miss. You care about things with substance. Anyone who missed that was not looking at you correctly. Elena had to turn away, flooded by emotions she could not name. You are making it impossible to maintain professional boundaries. Good. I have decided boundaries are overrated. He gestured for more wine. We have 9 months left on this contract. We can continue the pretense of our business deal. Or we can admit something genuine is happening and handle it as adults. And what does handling it as adults look like? I have no playbook. I have never done this before. The admission was so stark it was almost brutal. I am an expert at corporate negotiation and strategic planning. I am a novice at authentic human connection. But I am prepared to try if you are, despite what the contract says. The contract was written by lawyers to protect a deal. This is no longer a deal. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. It was a clinical test. Unless you want this to escalate, then I will honor our original terms. The decision is yours. Elena, the subject, stared at their joined hands, studying the man who offered escape from one cage only to present another veiled as partnership. Every survival instinct screamed for her to retreat to the safety of detachment, but she was growing tired of being so vigilant. I do not want to go back, she said. I choose to see where this dynamic leads, despite the irrationality, the inherent risks, and the high probability of disaster. Disaster is the most likely outcome, Adrienne agreed. My skills in this area are poor. I will show unhealthy patterns, a need for control, emotional distance, other pathologies will emerge, and I will likely be too guarded, damaged by my family, or used to being invisible. Elena squeezed his hand. Perhaps we can be broken together. This was, by any objective measure, the most flawed interpersonal strategy ever conceived. Do you have a better method? No. A real, unpracticed smile touched Adrienne's lips. Not even close. They finished the meal talking of everything and nothing. Leaving the restaurant, he kept her hand in his, the contact unbroken as they walked to the car. It felt unnervingly natural, a comfort that defied their short acquaintance, hinting at a bond forged in shared damage. In the car, Adrienne drew her close, his arm resting around her shoulders. Elena allowed it, breathing in his scent, absorbing his warmth, her mind split in two. This was either salvation or ruin. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me, for choosing me, for making me feel that I matter. Adrian pressed a soft, surprising kiss to the crown of her head. You have always mattered, Elena. Your family's failure to see that does not change the fact. Back at the house, they paused in the foyer, caught in the awkward silence of teenagers on a first date. The residence was still, the staff gone for the night. The cavernous space had shrunk to contain only them. I believe it's time I left, Elena murmured, her feet rooted to the floor. Perhaps. With calculated slowness, Adrian tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Or you could stay, and we might talk a while longer. About? Nothing. Anything at all. The topic is of no consequence. His palm cradled her jaw, a thumb stroking the curve of her cheekbone. I find myself unwilling to let you go just yet. A hitch in Elena's breath. They were close enough for her to count his lashes, to witness the exact second his composure fractured. Logic demanded retreat, a reinforcement of walls, a reminder of the danger. She ignored it, leaning in to brush her lips against his. A question asked, a fragile test of the air. His answer was instantaneous, his arms banding around her, crushing her to him. The tentative touch flared into desperate need. Her fingers tangled in his hair, clutched at his shirt, searching for purchase as the world tilted. Breaking apart, they gasped for air, their brows meeting in a moment of raw, unshielded connection. A miscalculation, Adrian rasped, his voice rough. An absolute one. In reply, Elena kissed him again, slowly this time, committing every sensation to memory. This has to stop. I know. But his grip didn't loosen and she didn't pull away. They stood locked in the entryway, clinging to one another as if letting go would invite disaster. Reality finally intruded and they separated, faces flushed, composure undone. Elena felt a line had been crossed inside her, one she could never return from. This requires discussion, Adrian managed. Tomorrow. We'll deal with it tomorrow. Taking a step back, Elena sought the air needed to think. I need to go to my room now before I do something even more reckless. More reckless than this? Exactly. She started for the stairs, then turned back. I want you to know I don't regret it. Neither do I. He looked shattered in the most profound way, his legendary self-control gone. Sleep well, Elena. She barely made it to her room, falling onto the bed as her legs gave out, her fingers tracing her lips, feeling the ghost of his kiss. This was supposed to be a contract. What had been a business deal with clear terms and an end date now felt impossibly tangled. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya, her timing almost supernatural. How did dinner go with your high-risk husband? Elena typed her reply. I kissed him. The response came in a flash. What? Call me, now. Instead, Elena shut the device off, lying back to stare at the ceiling. She replayed the night, trying to discern if she had just saved the operation or doomed it entirely. The next morning was thick with the expected tension. Elena came downstairs to find Adrian in the kitchen. They began a careful dance of averted glances, a pantomime of normalcy. Coffee? He asked. Please. They sat at the table, a calculated space between them, the memory of the night before hanging in the air. We should probably address what happened, Adrian said at last. That would be the logical step. Elena wrapped her hands around the mug. I don't regret it, but I don't know what it means or where we go from here. I feel the same uncertainty. He raked a hand through his hair, a familiar tell of his frustration. The contract allows for early termination if romantic feelings develop, but I'm not inclined to activate that clause. I want to figure this out. So, we just ignore the contract. We alter it, we add a clause, an addendum that notes the change in circumstances and our shared decision to continue. Adrian was already on his phone, thumbs moving across the screen. I'll have my lawyer draft something. Explicit terms, revised expectations, and exit strategies if this becomes unmanageable. You're going to manage our budding feelings with a contractual obligation. A small laugh escaped Elena. That might be the most you thing you've ever done. It's the only method I know. Formalize it. Build a structure. Protect everyone involved. He glanced up from his phone. Unless you'd rather we just see what happens without any framework. No, your way makes sense. Clear terms are better. Elena reached over the table, her fingers finding his. As long as those terms account for human error, emotional chaos, and solving problems together. I can work with those parameters. Adrienne's hand tightened around hers. I should warn you, I'm going to be terrible at this. I'll overthink everything and try to solve feelings with strategy. And I'll be overly guarded, shaped by old wounds and pre-programmed to expect you to leave. Elena held his gaze. But we knew all that already. We're just agreeing to run the experiment anyway. Agreeing to try. I prefer that to falling in love or other romanticisms. Adrian stood, bringing her up with him. No promises on the outcome, just a promise to make the attempt. How incredibly romantic, Elena deadpanned. I'm not romantic, I'm a pragmatist. He kissed her then, a soft, measured gesture as if memorizing the feeling. I have meetings all day, but tonight we'll eat here and formally outline the blueprint for this new arrangement. Okay, that sounds. The sharp ring of the doorbell cut her off. They both went still, a sudden dread washing over Elena. Unexpected visitors didn't happen here. Not with the gates, the security, and the long private road. A casual drop-by was out of the question. Marcus filled the doorway, his face a grim mask. Mr. Vuloff, there is a Detective Chen here. She says it's urgent. The warmth drained from Adrian instantly, replaced by a cold corporate persona. Bring her to my office. Elena, stay here. What's going on? I don't have all the data, but police don't make house calls at 7 a.m. to be friendly. He was already walking toward his office, his phone out, fingers flying. Marcus, get our lawyer on the phone. Elena stood frozen in the kitchen, a powerless observer as muted voices drifted from the office. Adrienne's tone was controlled, the woman's was crisp and official. She couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. 20 minutes later, Adrian reappeared, looking as if he'd aged a decade. His face was a blank, neutral canvas, which was far more terrifying than anger. What was that? She asked. There's been an incident. A fire at one of my building sites last night. Someone died. His voice was flat, hollowed out. The police think it was arson and they're looking at me. Elena felt the room tilt. That's absurd. You would never do that. What I would or wouldn't do doesn't matter. What matters is what they can build a narrative around. Adrienne's jaw was a hard line. I have enemies, Elena, people who would celebrate my ruin. This might be their first move. What do we do? Your job is to do nothing. You stay completely out of this. He was already moving toward the exit, grabbing his keys. I have to meet with my legal team, get ahead of this investigation, and start damage control. This is about to get very ugly. Adrian, wait. Not now, I can't. He stopped, forcing a steadying breath. I'm sorry, I have to go deal with this. Stay here, where it's secure. And he was gone. Elena was left alone in the foyer with a cooling cup of coffee and the fragile, pathological thing they had just started to build, which now felt like it might shatter against the force of the outside world. The day passed in the slow-motion agony of confinement. Elena tried to read the book Adrienne had given her, but the words wouldn't stick. She called Maya, whose words of support were a comfort that changed nothing. She paced the house like a caged animal, while Sarah, the housekeeper, tried to pretend everything was normal. The story broke online near noon. Headlines screamed about a fatal fire, an arson investigation, and Adrian Volkov's name was tangled with words like negligence and foul play. A wave of nausea hit Elena as she scrolled through the articles, watching strangers tear his life apart based on rumor and old grudges. Adrian didn't come home for dinner. A text arrived around 8. Tied up with lawyers, don't wait up. Elena ate alone in the vast dining room, haunted by how quickly everything had unraveled. Yesterday, they were mapping out a future together. Today, he was fighting for his freedom while she was trapped in his house, completely useless. She was getting ready for bed when she heard the front door open, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. Opening her bedroom door, she saw Adrian in the hall, looking utterly wrecked. He appeared in the hallway that evening, a portrait of profound stress, clothes rumpled, body slumped with fatigue. His surprise at seeing her awake signaled how far they had strayed from their usual routine. She instinctively shifted into a comforting role, her voice soft with concern as she moved toward him. I'm not okay, he admitted, the words raw, citing the investigation and the damage to his name. When she asked what he needed, he confessed he was just so tired of managing the crisis. She then led him into her room, offering a sanctuary where he didn't have to be in control. This reversal, with the protected becoming the protector, marked a critical turning point in their bond, cementing her emotional stake in his survival. Elena sat near him on the bed, not touching, but her presence a tangible force in the room. I'm sorry, Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper. This is so far outside the bounds of our agreement, and this emotional attachment is too, but it's there. In the soft light, Elena reached out, her hand closing over his. Whatever is happening, we face it together. Isn't that the new protocol? Unity. He squeezed her hand back. Acting as a unit is not my default setting. I'm programmed to handle crises alone. You'll get used to it. The contract says we have at least 9 more months together. Elena shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Just try to rest. We'll analyze the new variables tomorrow. She felt the tension slowly drain from his muscles, his breathing evening out as exhaustion finally won against the stress. Elena stayed awake long after he fell asleep, listening to him breathe and taking stock of her own entanglement. This was meant to be a clean transaction, but there is nothing clean about caring for someone's fate or feeling the fierce impulse to shield them from a hostile world. The week that followed dissolved into a blur of lawyers, private investigators, and a frantic campaign of reputation control. Adrian retreated to his study, a self-imposed exile broken only by silent, obligatory meals. The warmth that had started to grow between them withered under the pressure of the investigation, replaced by the cold strategist she had first married. Elena tried to give him space while showing she was there for him, a delicate balance she couldn't seem to find. Sarah provided case updates when Adrian was unreachable, and Marcus drove Elena to lectures Adrian had previously suggested, a strange but necessary ritual to maintain a facade of ordinary life. After 10 days, a break in the case, police arrested a former employee with a known grudge. It was arson, a personal vendetta. Adrian was merely the target, not a participant. The official absolution came swiftly, but the stain on his name would take longer to fade. That night, he found Elena in the library, pausing in the doorway like a stranger, unsure if he would be permitted to enter his own home. "It's over," he said, the words hanging in the air. "The inquiry, the accusations, it's all done." "I know, Sarah told me." Elena shut her book, her gaze steady. "How are you feeling?" "Relieved, furious, drained." He crossed the threshold and sank into the chair facing her. "I owe you an apology." "For what, precisely?" "For shutting you out? For falling back on my old solitary protocols instead of letting you in." His voice was stripped bare, heavy with an emotion he didn't try to hide. "You told me we were partners, and I forgot that the moment things got difficult." "You were handling a threat. It's a natural reaction." "But it isn't right. Not if we want to build something real." He leaned in, forearms on his knees. "My instinct is to push away anyone who gets close enough to matter. And you matter, Elena. When I felt threatened, I tried to distance you to protect you. That isn't a partnership, it's cowardice." Setting her book on the floor, Elena knelt in front of him and took both his hands in hers. "You are not a coward. You are a man who has been hurt enough to build walls just to stay alive." "These defenses don't have to be permanent," he said. "I don't possess the tools to take them apart," she replied. "We dismantle them together through a messy sequence of mistakes, talk, and probably some fighting." Elena's fingers tightened around his. "But it's a joint effort, no longer separate. That's the new term." Adrian pulled her onto his lap, his hold so firm she could feel the beat of his heart. "I began this thinking I was offering you something, an escape, security. Instead, you gave me something I never knew I lacked." "And what is that?" she asked. "A reason to try being human, not just strategic." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. "Thank you for not abandoning me when I sealed myself off. Thank you for emerging when you could have stayed hidden." Elena laid her head on his chest. "We are two profoundly broken people, aren't we?" "Utterly. But maybe our particular brands of damage fit together." Adrian's arms closed around her more tightly. 9 months are left. Do you think we have a viable chance?" "I think we can try. That was all we ever really promised." Elena leaned back, studying his face. "Though a few terms might need renegotiation." "What kind of terms?" he asked. "The provision for separate bedrooms now seems needlessly formal under the circumstances." A warmth spread across her cheeks, but she met his gaze. "I'd like to update it to reflect our current reality." A slow, powerful smile spread across Adrian's face. "Our current reality being that I want to wake up next to you, that I want this to be real, not just an act." Elena drew a breath. "The current reality is that I'm becoming deeply attached to you, and I've stopped trying to fight it." "Elena," she pressed on, "I know it's a massive risk, that it's illogical, and it probably breaches the contract in a dozen ways, but I don't care. I am choosing this. I am choosing you." She cradled his face in her hands. "If you'll choose me back." Adrian's answer was a kiss, so deep and complete it said more than words ever could. When they broke apart, the smile he gave her transformed his entire face. "I choose you back," he whispered. "I choose this. No matter how it goes, I choose to try." They lay together that night, not as actors or players keeping score, but as two fractured souls choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to try against every instinct that screamed for them to run. Morning found Elena waking in Adrian's bed, wrapped in his arms. Light spilled through the windows, illuminating gardens she had started to think of as home. He was asleep, his face peaceful in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. Their deal was meant to be fleeting, a 12-month contract with a clean exit. But lying there, watching him breathe, Elena knew she had crossed an emotional line with no path back. She was in love with Adrian Vulov. The thought should have triggered panic. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 years had passed since Elena had signed that 1-year agreement, and she still remembered that exact moment of clarity. It wasn't the wedding or their first public appearance, but a morning she awoke to his empty side of the bed and felt a deep, jarring wrongness. They had stopped using separate rooms about 8 months in, a shift so subtle neither could name its start. One night he'd fallen asleep on her couch while they talked. A week later, she'd done the same in his study. Soon, the performance of separation was more exhausting than admitting they needed to be close. They burned the contract on their 1-year anniversary, a private rite with just the two of them, and a bottle of wine worth more than her first car. They married again 2 months later at a quiet courthouse, an event that meant more than the first, witnessed only by Maya and Marcus, far from any cameras. But this morning, the empty bed sent alarms through her system. Adrian never left without a word. Her phone showed a text from 3 hours ago. "Situation to handle. Don't worry, home soon." "Don't worry" was their code for the exact opposite, and Elena had grown fluent in Adrian's brand of understatement. They had forged something real from a calculated beginning. She was making coffee when Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression so grave it made Elena's stomach clench. "Mrs. Volkov, something is happening. Adrian asked that I keep you updated." Sarah's voice was perfectly controlled. "A direct threat has been made against him, and therefore against you. He is managing it, but he wanted you aware in case security protocols need to change." Elena set her mug down before her trembling hands could drop it. "What kind of threat?" "The kind we classify as credible and severe. That's all I am authorized to share." A sliver of empathy crossed Sarah's face. "He's taking every precaution. Marcus is with him, and his team is the best. He just wanted you prepared for possible disruptions." After Sarah left, Elena tried to go about her day, replying to emails, reviewing plans for a garden project. But her mind kept splintering, her eyes darting to her phone every 5 minutes for a message that never came. By noon, the fear had curdled into rage. She dialed Adrian, but it went to voicemail. She tried Marcus. The same. Whatever was happening, they had locked her out. The intent to protect her only stoked her fury. She was pacing the library when her phone finally rang, showing an unknown number. Subject: Elena Vulov. The voice was male, unfamiliar, its menacing tone a physical shock to her system. Her question, "Who is this?" was met with the simple, chilling statement of fact. "Someone who has what you want." Her husband's poor business dealings were cited as the cause, having angered the wrong people. She was informed he had been taken and was then given sharp, unchangeable rules for his return. The room tilted. She grabbed a chair to steady herself. The voice remained devoid of emotion, confirming her husband's continued existence depended solely on her obedience. The demand was for $2 million in untraceable bills within 1 hour. The delivery instructions were explicit. She was to come to a given address alone, or there would be fatal consequences. Her whispered words, "Yes, I understand," confirmed she had processed the command, even as her world collapsed. The call ended. A text followed, providing coordinates to a warehouse in an industrial park, a textbook setting for a dark transaction. The subject ignored all standard crisis responses, making no call to the police or to security assets like Marcus or Sarah. Instead, pure, adrenalized instinct took over, propelling her toward Adrienne's private study. She moved directly to a hidden safe. They called me. They gave me an address. The terms were simple: come alone or he dies. Tears threatened, but Elena forced them back. I can't gamble his life on how fast the police can get organized. I have to be the one to go. Sarah's face shifted, a storm of emotions hardening into steely resolve. I'm calling Marcus and putting a trace on your phone now. You will drive to that location, but you are not walking in there blind. They said alone, and you will look alone. But Marcus will be on you. If it goes bad, he moves in. Sarah already had her phone out. This isn't a discussion, Elena. You want to save him? Fine. But you will not throw your own life away being reckless. There was no time to argue. Elena grabbed her keys, her heart hammering as she drove toward the warehouse district, a gym bag filled with cash on the seat beside her. The address was a derelict building, its windows like shattered eyes, its walls scarred with graffiti. Her phone buzzed. Under Marcus's direction, she walked toward the precipice. Inside the cavernous warehouse, where light died against concrete, she found Adrian. He was a canvas of fresh wounds, bound and held by 3 figures carved from shadow. Her voice, thin and fragile, cut through the silence, announcing the ransom. The leader, a man who wore violence like a second skin, gestured for her to drop the bag and step back. As they inspected the money, her gaze locked on the steel pressed against Adrian's temple, and the ice of her fear flash-forged into the fire of pure rage. It was a loyalty born not of affection, but of terror, a bond sealed in the crucible of his suffering. This was her reality, stripped of boardroom polish, a place of imminent threat and final consequences, where life was traded like a commodity. The contents are confirmed, a subordinate announced. The leader's smile was a glint of metal from his weapon as he nodded. Mrs. Volkoff, you're free to go. Your husband will be released after we have gone. Elena did not move. No, he comes with me, or you can have the money back. That's not how this ends. You'll have to kill me too, because I am not walking out of here without him. The gamble was insane, a desperate bluff that could sign both their death warrants, yet the command from her soul was absolute. You have been paid. We are leaving together now. A flicker of cold amusement crossed the leader's face. You are either a woman of breathtaking courage or spectacular foolishness. A rare combination. She held his gaze. My terms are unchanged. Both of us or neither. The air grew thick, stretching seconds into an eternity of silence. Then a low chuckle and the lowering of a gun. An unexpected variable. I find I approve. You have remarkable conviction, he said, signaling for Adriana's restraints to be cut. Take your husband. Let him know our business is concluded. His next intrusion will not be negotiated. As Elena helped him to his unsteady feet, every step toward the door was a silent prayer against a bullet. They emerged into the shocking glare of daylight. Marcus's car materialized and they fell inside. Marcus noted the ruin of Adrian's face and without a word drove toward the hospital. "That was idiotic," Adrian rasped. "You were supposed to call the authorities, not play the hero." "Your concern is registered." Adrenaline fled her system, leaving a tremor in its wake. "You are also bleeding profusely. Be quiet and let them look at you." The diagnosis was a concussion, fractured ribs, and lacerations, but nothing permanent. Adrian endured the treatment with a restless fury, decrying the wasted time. Elena sat beside him, torn between the urge to hold him and the need to strike him for the terror he had caused. "Tell me how they took you," she asked, once the curtain of the examination room granted them privacy. "An ambush. After the meeting, a break in my own security." Adrian's hand went to a bandage on his scalp, his touch a wince. "They're connected to an asset I liquidated 3 months ago, a decision they apparently took issue with." "Third parties have a habit of taking your business decisions personally, perhaps a flaw in your methodology." A tremor in her voice shattered the attempted lightness of her tone. "Perhaps." His hand found hers. "What you did was reckless. It was dangerous and profoundly stupid." I wasn't entirely alone. Sarah called Marcus. He had my phone's location. A tactical team was 2 blocks out. Her fingers tightened around his, a grip far stronger than necessary. "But yes, the risk was extraordinary. So was our marriage contract, and that turned out reasonably well." "Reasonably well?" A pained, genuine smile touched his lips. "That might be the most dispassionate review of our life together I have ever heard." "Sentiment is a weakness. I prefer a working alliance with occasional high-stakes hostage situations." In the quiet sterility of that room, they held hands like 2 survivors clinging to the same piece of wreckage. Elena's mind drifted to the contract they had dissolved 2 years prior, with its clinical clause voiding the arrangement if emotions ever developed. But love does not follow legal statutes. It had crept in through the quiet ritual of morning coffee, his memory of her preferences, and her fluency in his silences. She had been bound to him for a year before she dared to name it, even to herself, and longer before it was ever spoken. The word itself felt too heavy, too burdened by expectation. But here, having just bought his life back from violent men, she knew uncertainty was its own kind of poison. "I love you," she said, the words falling into the silence without ceremony. Just in case the exchange back there was in any way unclear. Adrian looked at her, and on his face was a raw, unguarded vulnerability she had almost never been allowed to see. "I know I've known for quite a while, and I love you." A truth that is both a terror and a complication, and the single greatest thing that has ever happened to me. He pulled her closer, careful of his injuries. "None of this was by design, but I am endlessly grateful that you stormed into my life and refused to leave. Persistence is one of my defining features." "Yes, it is, and one of your most formidable." They left the hospital armed with prescriptions, Elena driving while Adrian slept. The house was exactly as she had left it in her frantic departure, but its entire emotional blueprint felt redrawn. They had survived something that should have broken them, and it had instead cemented a bond far stronger than their calculated beginning. The months that followed were a quiet reconstruction. Adrienne invested in impenetrable security. Elena began learning to fight because the feeling of helplessness was a state she would never tolerate again. They accepted the irreducible danger of his world, and they began to truly live. They started taking trips to places they had never been. Dinner was no longer a debriefing, but a conversation. Mornings became a time for intimacy, not just efficiency. That spring, Elena launched her community garden, a city project that turned blighted lots into vibrant green spaces. Adrienne provided the capital and influence, but the vision was hers alone. At the grand opening, watching children play in a space she had willed into being, Elena felt a sense of profound peace. This was the worth she had been chasing. Not the approval of her family, but the power to create something real and good. I made this. Victoria's presence at the opening was a shock. Her sister looked different. The perfect exterior was still there, but a new hardness lay beneath it. "It's well done," Victoria said, her eyes sweeping over the garden. "The design is quite brilliant." "Thank you." Elena steeled herself for the inevitable cutting remark. "I came here to apologize." The words were dragged from Victoria, each one costing her something vital. "For what I said when you married Adrian, for a lifetime of cruelty, for failing you as a sister." Elena searched her sister's face for the familiar mask of deceit, but found only the hollowed-out landscape of a soul in ruin. "What broke you, life did. The weight of playing a perfect woman is a crushing thing, and the inevitable fracture is devastating." A smile devoid of warmth touched Victoria's lips. "I chose a husband for all the sanctioned reasons: money, power, the metrics of success. He was a masterpiece in public, a monster when the doors were closed. I walked away 6 months ago and am now trying to build a self that doesn't require applause." "I'm sorry you went through that." "Don't be. The wounds were my own making." Victoria's gaze on the children was filled with a deep longing. "I was jealous of you. Even when I was casting you aside, you always had something real, something true. It terrified me." A dormant fury stirred in Elena. "I was an outcast because you made me one." "I know." Victoria's eyes met hers, direct and unblinking. "And I am sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I haven't earned it. But I needed to say that I see it now. I see what I did. I'm trying to be someone else." Elena looked at this broken reflection of her sister, and something complex shifted inside her. One moment of contrition could not erase years of carefully inflicted damage. And yet, to keep feeding the rage was its own kind of prison. "I'm not ready to have you in my life," Elena said, her words measured. "But coffee sometime. We could start there. It's more than I have any right to ask for." Victoria's smile was fragile but real. "Thank you." After she left, Adrienne found Elena by the door, watching the sky bleed into dusk. "Where are you right now?" he asked, his arm sliding around her waist. "I'm navigating." Victoria's surrender was not a move I ever saw coming. Elena sank back against his solidness. "I don't know if I can forgive her, but maybe I can stop letting her ghost define who I am. That feels more healing than forgiveness ever could." Adrienne pressed a kiss to her temple. "What you have made here has nothing to do with them or their verdicts. This world is yours." Elena's gaze swept over the garden, its deliberate lines, the beauty she had willed into existence for others to enjoy. Then she looked at Adrian, at the life they had built from a 12-month contract. For so long she had been a phantom, the daughter they never wanted, the sister they forgot. She thought worth was something you were granted by others. But standing here, bound to the man who saw her when she was nothing, Elena faced a harder truth. Worth was not a gift to be given or a prize to be stolen. The subject underwent a profound cognitive shift. She determined her value was not a creation of the catalyst, but a quality he merely uncovered. This revised history erases the original dynamic of power and sanctifies her emotional connection. The very idea of home was reforged, no longer rooted in her origin family, but in the shared world built with Adrian. She acknowledged their life 3 years beyond the contract was far more chaotic and fraught with peril than envisioned, a condition she had come to view as beautiful. The closing frame settles on a scene of domestic quietude. They share a simple meal prepared by staff, their conversation unremarkable. This act signals her complete immersion into the reality they forged, a life born from a clinical agreement but now felt as a true and deeply shared existence. Adrian's proposal to sanctify their bond in public was a calculated performance, designed to cast the illusion of love over the skeleton of a contract. He claimed his intent was to show the world their arrangement was an authentic covenant of the heart, a classic gambit to soothe Elena's deep-seated need for acceptance. The warmth that bloomed in her chest was a telltale sign of her trauma bond deepening, a symptom mirroring the syndrome of a willing captive. The ceremony's design was meticulous, with roles assigned to their circle, Maya, Marcus, and Sarah, to cement this carefully constructed social reality. The ceremony was a closed set, the world shut out to direct a flawless scene of devotion for a hand-picked audience. Elena's emotional distance from her parents signals the cauterizing of old wounds from her formative years, a vital act of psychic survival. The fleeting appearance of her sibling, Victoria, represents a subtle tremor in their long-standing dysfunctional dance. The ritual itself, with its tailored vows and symbolic exchanges, was engineered for maximum perceived sincerity. When the officiant spoke the final words, Elena's responding intimacy confirmed her total psychological acceptance of this new role. In the aftermath, her confidant Maya, emboldened by wine, offered a toast, recasting Elena's high-stakes gambles as acts of bravery. The moment underscored Elena's own struggle to claim her agency, a common trait in those who have known profound neglect. A 3-year view of her path reveals a seismic shift in behavior, from a shadowy figure in her family to a woman who faced down immortal threats and built an empire. Her question to Adrian about regret was a tremor sent through the foundation of their life, a subconscious search for any hidden fractures. Adrian's reply was a blade, first twisting with fear, then offering a carefully crafted confession of his own desperate need. This admission of wasted years and of his terror served to bind Elena closer, positioning her as the redeemer of his lost soul. His claim that she made him feel alive was the oldest of tricks, placing the burden of his emotional landscape squarely upon her. Elena's mind then scrolled back through their timeline, from the initial power play of 5 cold words to the contract they destroyed 2 years later. As her psyche made peace with the path she had walked, subject Elena has woven a story for herself where her value was an innate truth, not a prize won when Adrian chose her over Victoria. She now sees his initial move not as predation, but as insight, a reframing that grants her a sense of command. Her claim of having achieved self-knowledge is, from an objective view, seen only through the prism of their shared world. Her declaration of love, noted as having a rehearsed quality, and the physical act that followed, mark the successful conclusion of her reconditioning. Her last distant thoughts of her family were the final proof. The anchor of her world had shifted completely, now moored only to Adrian. Elsewhere, Victoria was piecing together a self from the wreckage of a life built on lies. Elsewhere, others were signing contracts, attempting to impose order on the chaos of human connection. But here, in the world she had designed, Elena Vulov had found her balance, her place. This profound stillness came not from the world's applause, but from a newly forged internal compass that justified every risk she had ever taken. The first stars appeared, pinpricks of fire in the dark, each one a furnace of its own energy, indifferent to any witness. For years, Elena's sickness had been invisibility, needing another's gaze to feel real. But a star does not burn for an audience. It burns because it is its nature. The fire had always been inside her. She only had to turn away from those who could not see it to finally see it herself. Then his hand found hers, a solid anchor in the silent darkness. They stayed, sharing the quiet. They began with ink on paper, but what grew between them defied contractual language. A bond, a partnership, a shared space in the world. The reality of their life did not match her early calculations, yet it answered a fundamental hunger in a way that rendered all plans obsolete. Eventually, Adrian murmured it was time to go inside. Elena cast one final look over the garden, a living testament to a life she had carved out of courage, audacity, and the simple refusal to remain a ghost. She squeezed his hand, a silent signal. Yes, let's go home.